unique about what's going on now is, like you mentioned, the mortgage rates and how it's an attempt to increase consumer spending. Chinese people are not spending money; they're very adverse to. They're trying to save as much as they can. And what is interesting is in Chinese society now how much pessimism there is. I mean, there was the lie flat movement, the let it rot. Youth unemployment is through the roof. They're calling it the garbage time of history. And this is such a big change from a couple of years ago when it seemed like, there was a lot of optimism about the future of China, the little pinks trumpeting their horns, and now it's just it seems like no one believes anything is going to get better.
And I think that absolutely plays a role, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the things was for much of, let's say, the 2010 period to 2020, there were a lot of businesses being started. This is really when companies like Alibaba and others were just exploding in growth, and they were trumpeting the entrepreneurs and the barons that were getting rich and stuff like that. And one of the things is as Xi has cracked down, it's not just targeting the Jack Ma's of the world, it's, the uber wealthy, but you're hearing this from even small entrepreneurs of how hard it is to start a business. And the even low level officials can take businesses or shut them down at any time for any reason because of that attitude that starts at the top. And so there's absolutely this pessimism about striking out on your own and doing something. But I think there's the flip side of that is if you go back, say, 30, 40, 50 years, there was this idea of the iron rice bowl, okay, where you could go to work for an SOE and you're not going to get rich, but you're going to be comfortable for the rest of your life, okay? You're going to be fine, okay? And I think part of the pessimism is not just the problems with entrepreneurs, but basically now there is no iron rice bowl. You can't go to work for an SOE and just be comfortable for the rest of your life as long as you follow the rules. If you look at, for instance, the number of applicants that they're getting for government jobs, you literally will have, thousands of people taking the civil service exam for, a handful of spots. Okay. So the acceptance rate is under 1%. Similar thing for SOE type companies. And so so not only have they lost faith in being able to set out on your own and do something, they've absolutely lost faith in the concept of the iron rice bowl. And so now they're looking at their future going, what's going to happen? How am I going to make a living? How am I going to survive?
Well, one thing I want to draw out about something you just said is, a lot of blame is being put on Xi Jinping and his policies in particular. But as you said, when you were in China in 2006, before Xi came, already these decisions were being made to make the Chinese economy function on a debt machine. So how are Chinese people seeing this? Do they see it as, and at foreign investors, is it a problem with just Xi, or do they see that the reality is that this is a bigger problem with the fundamental communist system?
I was discussing my daughter is taking a college class for Chinese, and so she's actually giving a presentation today on Hong Kong and kind of discussing some of that issue of how popular is Xi. And it's not to cop out, but it's very, very hard to answer that question. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, for instance, if Xi was to run in a free and fair election, would he get elected? 5, 8 years ago, I would say, yeah, I think probably likely he would get elected in an open election, rather comfortably. Today, I don't think that would necessarily be the case. And that leads to the question, in China or anyplace else, voters and the populace at large tend to basically vote with their pocketbook first and foremost, and how they're doing. So would that be a vote against Xi, or would that be a vote against the system? I think it is clear. And again, we can't say with certainty how much, but I do think it is very clear Chinese people are increasingly chafing at so many of the restrictions. When I say that, I want to be clear, it's not necessarily down with the CCP, but there was this thinking, if we get wealthy, I can go on vacation to Australia or Thailand or wherever, and I don't have to ask the CCP to take money so I can go on vacation. Okay? But the reality is that if you want to go on vacation to even Thailand, you have to go through multiple layers of bureaucracy, especially if you work in an SOE or even if you're just an elementary school teacher, to get your passport, to go to Thailand. And then you have to go through multiple steps to get money to be able to spend money in Thailand and get a hotel. And so I think they are absolutely chafing at many of those controls. And this isn't necessarily we want free speech and democracy, but they are absolutely, I think there's a lot of evidence that they are chafing at those controls. Whether or not that translates into, let's say the CCP is a problem, as you say, and, there's a systemic problem. It's not just Xi. I think it's harder to get a good idea on. I suspect that there's probably a growing, if not at least some material number that would say, yes, the CCP is what's pushing these controls that we're chafing against, and that's the underlying problem. How broad that is, that's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I was thinking 2 years ago, there were the white paper protests, which were essentially led to the end of the zero COVID policy. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about those protests is we were seeing for the first time on, I don't want to say a large scale, but certainly a statistically significant scale, we were seeing people actually protest the CCP, the central government, Xi Jinping. Whereas typically before, and for most of the time we were doing China Uncensored, we see people protesting, and it would be like protesting the local government, local officials,
or a company,
yeah, or a bank. People having faith that, at least the central government will come and fix this.
Yeah, maybe the central government doesn't know what's happening locally.
Right. I think that's what's starting to shift. And even if, the white paper protests are over and they went around
secretly arrested
and threatened everybody or arrested them afterwards, that doesn't mean that people have let go of their ideas about the CCP. It just means they keep quiet because they recognize that it's actually still a pretty high risk to talk trash about the CCP in public.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're entirely right. I'm probably a little more circumspect, only in the sense of numerically. I think it's very, very hard to throw your arms around and get a what I would consider numbers I could express high confidence in. The other thing is that there's this strange, almost like Stockholm syndrome like approach where a lot of times they will say, the party does bad stuff, but we can't do away with the party. So they might cite an issue, or maybe it's a leader or something like that, but they're convinced in some ways that the party just doesn't understand. Okay. And so they don't necessarily attribute it. And it's very, very complicated. So I don't want to judge people like that. And I don't want to necessarily excuse them. I just want to say it's a phenomenon that exists as to how people make sense of the realities they see, of saying, I'm frustrated with something, and how do I, attribute blame to that?